So we actually just had this chat out back already. We're done.
Yeah, so you missed it.
We've answered all the questions. So one of the things that Tom was very adamant about when we were talking about putting this event together was he doesn't want to talk about VR, or at least not very much about VR. And I'm 100% in agreement with him because so as a company that's a media-focused company, we have an investment in a VR outfit. We're using VR for investment relations purposes. But I have a big problem with VR in that every time I put the glasses on, I have the fear of being kicked in the balls. Maybe it's because I'm a parent, maybe it's because I hang around with the wrong people. But that first 3 minutes, I'm like, where are you all? Get out of my way. Augmented reality is a whole different situation. We played around with a game that's a ski jump game in the office, and you put the glasses on and you think, I'm standing on a concrete floor, I know where everything is. But the moment you start leaning forward down that mountain, everybody who tries this game falls over. And this is, to me, the big problem with VR. It has its uses, but everyone goes wild about, well, where's the money going to be made in VR? It's not. It's going to be made in AR, which is really where you focus Super Ventures. If you could explain to us like where you see the industry headed.
Sure. So just to be clear, the reason why I don't want to talk about VR isn't because I don't think that VR has a tremendous amount of opportunities. It's just because my focus is on AR and the fund's focus is on AR. And also because I believe, and the fund and my partners believe, that AR is the larger opportunity, mainly because this technology allows for computers to coexist in the real world around us. So if you subscribe to a future where we still want to be here, then augmented reality is the future. It's the evolution of the smartphone. Essentially what's happening is the previous waves are kind of akin to a blindfolded super brain in a jar that we carry around. That's kind of how I feel. And augmented reality is going to break that jar and allow for us to take the blindfold off that super brain so that now that computer has its own senses. It can see, it can hear, it can feel, it can understand the world around it. So we don't have to keep feeding it information by our social updates or our coding or the creation of the World Wide Web. And also it will allow for that computer to coexist in the world around us. It's no longer imprisoned behind that pane of glass, which is your smartphone or your computer. And that means that can work harder, smarter, and faster for you. So augmented reality is that blurring between the digital and the physical. It allows for computers to really unleash its full potential and coexist with us here in this real world. And it's the combination of sensors and artificial intelligence that make it happen. So when you give computers their own senses, again, it means that they can see, they can feel, they can hear. But with AI, it takes it a step further. They don't just see a face, they recognize a face, and that is computer vision. And when you give computers access to our senses, on the flip side, it means that a computer can enhance, alter, and edit our perception. So it means that you can then see things that aren't there, like a Pikachu in the park, or hear things that aren't there, like contextual information whispered in your ear from Siri. This is the tremendous opportunity. And this is starting right now with mobile, but eventually the more natural way to engage with this are wearable devices like pairs of smart glasses.
So I looked through some of the things that you've said about AR in the past, and one of the things that was interesting to me was an article about the 6 things that you feel like developers should be focused on, and not one of them was things that are going to make money right now. Your fund is very focused towards what's going to happen next and then what's going to happen after that, as opposed to fighting for the easy cheese. What do you think are the things that, as an investor out here, that people should be looking for in augmented reality or virtual reality to go forward?
Yeah, so we've broken down our thesis, which is the creation of computer-mediated superpowers through augmented reality in 6 buckets. And all of these areas allow for the startups that we've invested in already to make money, but the immediate market is usually OEMs, manufacturers, developers, creators, and enterprise. Right now, the consumer market is just starting to bubble up. So you are right that our focus focus in general is more on the core fundamental technologies and platforms. So quickly, the 6 areas are, the first one, 3D-fine the world. So this is essentially creating the index of the world by allowing for computers to scan, track, and recognize objects, environments, people. So the same way that Google index the World Wide Web, the initiative to index the real world for it to become the fabric of which developers and creators use to create augmented reality experiences necessary. And if you're in this space, or if you've just been kind of eyeing the space, you may be familiar with the term the AR cloud. This is the creation of the AR cloud. So there's a lot of opportunity for startups, including a startup that we invested in called 6D, to be able to use various methods, including mono RGB cameras, the cameras on your smartphone today, to be able to scan the environment and allow for your smartphone to not only scan, but also recognize that it's a table versus a chair versus the floor.
As an example, so I might be shooting zombies across the street in Gastown using my phone to see where they're at.
Exactly.
And that the phone is recognizing that there's a pole over there and putting that pole in the game.
Yes, and there's a word, not to use too many buzzwords, but it's an important word to understand in life in general, but also in augmented reality, called occlusion. And occlusion means that an object can hide, essentially, behind other objects. It can be blocked by an object. And so that's really what makes the real world feel real. So if you've ever played Pokemon Go, these objects aren't anchored into the space, they're not persistent, they're not occluded, which means that they look like floating stickers. They don't look entirely real. The Magic Leap device or HoloLens device or solutions that are powered by startups like 6D, they allow for persistence, occlusion, and this means that if you had a Pikachu here, he could be hiding behind my chair, peek back out, go behind the chair. That's what really makes that digital object feel real. So that's like one major area of activity right now in augmented reality. The next is building upon that. So we call this world building. So once you have this index and the fabric, then you need to be able to create platforms, tools, and applications that enable developers and creators to create experiences and optimize them and monetize them. So that's another lucrative opportunity right now. Actually, we invested in a company here from Vancouver called Cognitive 3D, which does spatial analytics that allow for AR and VR developers to better understand how their content and experiences are doing and to use that data to optimize the content to make it better. The third area is what we call digitizing perception. And so these are startups that are enhancing human perception by digitizing senses. So any startups that are allowing for artificial vision, augmented hearing, emotion recognition, haptics, which is like vibrational feeling, are very lucrative. So this is all about immersion, you know what I mean? And so again, giving computers access to our senses by digitizing our senses means that a computer can make you feel a hug that isn't here. You can actually feel a hug from someone in London. You could see a Pikachu, which obviously is not here. You could hear a rustle of the wind through your AirPods. So it's this play with our perception, which is a really big opportunity as well. Yeah, I have 3 more, but I'm going to stop because I can keep going.
You can keep going. So early virtual reality was just around the corner from monetization back in 1985, back in 1974, back in 1990, 2 years ago, last year, this year. I'm of the opinion that, and it's much the same as I spent a lot of time on the cannabis market, and I feel like the cannabis market is the same. Everyone's trying to invest in cannabis without realizing that cannabis isn't the space. It's just an ingredient of other industries, beverages and pharmaceuticals, and the real money to be made is in that last mile rather than the growing of it. Virtual reality and augmented reality I see as the same thing. We mentioned back in the early days of the .com era, everyone was trying to make money, had a virtual shopping mall online. And they all died because virtual shopping isn't a company. Virtual shopping is a thing that other companies do. Mm-hmm. And augmented reality and virtual reality, we're seeing that mainstream legacy Forbes 500 companies of various sectors are spotting the opportunities to incorporate them into what they do rather than sell something in Best Buy to consumers. Do you think that's where the majority of the opportunity lies?
Yeah, I mean, like a technology is nothing unless it's utilized, right? I think that's what you're saying. So the opportunity eventually is an augmented reality. Augmented reality, like artificial intelligence, like blockchain, are all fundamental layers of which, you know, organizations need to build upon to create consumer experiences, to further productivity and efficiency in the enterprise. I mean, that being said, there needs to be specific blocks and bricks that need to be laid down in order for us to all get there, and that's kind of what I was alluding to with some of the startup opportunities today. There's still a lot of hard challenges, both in hardware and software, that need to be solved for us to even get to that point. Because we're building this new internet, we're building this new wave of computing. It's a lot different than the move from internet or computers to mobile. It's more akin to .com, where we're kind of starting all over again in some ways because of the shift from 2D to 3D. That being said, the enterprise is where we're seeing a lot of revenue opportunities with augmented reality and virtual reality through the use of platforms that are assisting with training and simulation, through what we call upgrading or upskilling, by allowing for workers in the field, for example, to wear pairs of glasses to get remote assistance, to turn amateur workers into professional ones overnight, reducing, human error, increasing efficiency by up to 40%. So these types of platforms that are then being implemented by brands as part of everyday ins and outs of doing the job are exactly where the technology needs to exist in order for it to be adopted.
I know that the Y Dreams multiplayer VR arcade out there, the game that they have, everyone who goes through it is like, this is crazy, I've never experienced anything like this. But when you talk to them, they say, look, down in Brazil, the Brazilian petrochemical company, Petrogas, came to us and said, we spend millions of dollars training firefighters to deal with oil well fires that may never happen. Can we use your system to create a game that, they're walking on a perilous, catwalk, and there's flames coming, and they have to hit the. And their answer was, "Yeah, give us 3 months. We've got it." Every single industry has those problems where you're having to create a simulation for pilots or for office workers. What happens in an emergency? Like, it just goes on and on and on. And the reality for me is virtual reality, as we've expected it to arrive, will never really arrive. It will never be the VR industry. Or the AR industry. It's going to be just this thing that slides in like cell phones did. It's just the same thing that slides in like TCP/IP did back in the early days of the internet. But as investors here, these guys are looking at what's going to be next. So where do you see, if you have, well, as you do have some money to invest, you're obviously a very long-term investor in this space, but for short-term guys that are looking at companies that show up on the market and say, we're a VR company, invest in us, well, what should people be really looking for?
Yeah, I mean, I somewhat agree with what you're saying, I think. The opportunities are still within the technology itself, again, because you're building the piping, you're building that road from which we're going to walk on. And eventually, just like the smartphone, it's not really about the smartphone. The smartphone enables other things, right? The smartphone enabled the App Store. The App Store apps are what are selling the smartphone today, the games, the applications, the social networks, the productivity tools. I think that we're going to start to see some AR-first opportunities within mobile AR. End of this year, we're going to see 900 million install base of mobile devices that are AR-enabled through ARKit, ARCore, Facebook, Snapchat platforms. So if I was an investor looking on the consumer side, I'd be looking at developers and startups that are really thinking outside the box on how to leverage augmented reality as a main feature within an application on the smartphone, understanding the nuances of a smartphone, meaning that it's much more of a snackable device. You're holding, the actual modality is that you're holding it up, and so that the time of that transaction is going to be a lot shorter than a pair of smart glasses, which are not yet on consumers' faces. So new and novel ways for interaction, new user experience, Any developer or startup founder that has found a killer use for AR, such as the try before you buy that's happening right now with makeup, for example, that can increase conversion by, well, how is this seeing up to 11% because augmented reality can convince somebody that that furniture looks good in the space. So I'd be eyeing on the consumer side any developer or startup founder that is thinking in that way, because there will be a lot of opportunity, and there'll be a lot of opportunity that can be sized up in revenue.
I noticed that none of that involves the word content.
It's all content. I was
Well,
exactly
it's
talking
content,
about
but it's
content.
not content in the traditional sense of like, we're going to develop a movie for virtual reality, we're going to develop a game for virtual reality.
I mean, we're going to see that. Like, it is kind of what I'm saying. I think that there is an opportunity for an AR-first social network to appear that may grab a lot of market share to get noticed by Instagram or Facebook to then be acquired. Like, I see that definitely happening. I'm following a couple of startups right now that have that potential. But essentially, the most immediate opportunities that we're seeing here, consumer, yes, but are more B2B. Facilitating enterprise solutions and facilitating developer tools, developer and creator solutions, and still, again, going back to filling some of the holes that the OEMs require on battery life, on display technology, on digitizing other senses that will need to be tacked on in order for that little elephant that you're holding in your hand to feel like an elephant, to hear like an elephant, not just be seen as a real elephant. So, like I mentioned at the top, like focusing on OEMs, developers, enterprise, those are the real big opportunities right now. The consumer one is coming together through mobile AR, and it will be content. There will be content plays. There will be hit-driven games. There will be social networks. There will be some productivity tools. But within the mobile world, AR is a feature. And so you're still playing within the mobile ecosystem, the same business models as mobile. So it's not just an augmented reality investment. It's a mobile augmented reality investment.
There's obviously risk with this sort of thing where technology will either move so quickly that it will pass by a lot of the things that you've invested in, or it will move slow enough that those things will run out of steam. I was on a tour of a facility in Toronto. It had a massive soundstage and a spider's web of DLSR cameras, like hundreds of DSLRs, all focused on a little spot on a table where they had a bottle of Pert hair shampoo. And they were using all of these cameras to do a 3D rendering of this shampoo bottle.
Right.
And while I was on the tour, a guy behind me was like, I just kind of developed this thing with my cell phone, and if I just go like this, it's done. And the guy's face dropped, like millions of dollars had gone down the drain. What sort of, do you find that your investments have that sort of risk? And if so, how do you mitigate it?
I think my sort of investments are the smartphone scanning. And I think that's a really great example of how we still need some really powerful tools in order to enable this future. I mean, look, we are 3D creatures that have been working in a 2D manner for years. One of the biggest shifts for VR and AR is spatial computing. It's moving from 2D to 3D. There are new workflow tools. There's new quality assurance tools. There's new content creation tools that need to be in place in order for us to be able to leverage this new foundation. I mean, Shopify just announced that with Apple's iOS 12, which Safari now has Quick Look, which allows you to see a 3D object in browser through an AR mode. 600,000 vendors can now take advantage of that. But how many of those 600,000 vendors have 3D models of their inventory? Ask yourself that. That's a startup opportunity, right? So, like, how are they going to get a scan? They could go and use a huge capture rig or capture studio. A lot of the larger players like Wayfair and IKEA, they have their own means and methods that they've created in-house because there's nothing out there that's scalable, that's affordable, that's easy to use. These are the types of startup opportunities that, as an investor, I'm looking at.
Does it ever feel exhausting? Like there's too much going on and too much potential, and the glue isn't yet there to bring it all together?
I think it's more exhilarating. It's an exhilarating exhaustion. That's maybe what I'll put. But I think that we are starting to see all the pieces be put together. That's the difference. This is the reason why augmented reality and virtual reality are here. They're not going away. This is not a fad. It's not 1990. It's not even 2006, 2009 when I first started in augmented reality. The smartphones are more robust. The cloud is more robust. Artificial intelligence is here. We're now putting sensors in our environment. The cameras are more robust on smartphones as sensors. Smart glasses are no longer $100,000, and they're much more miniaturized. The pieces are all here, and there's $5 billion of investment money that's been poured into AR and VR in the past 12 months alone. So, and all the big guys from Apple, Facebook, Alibaba, Porsche, Hyundai are in. So this isn't a should I. This is more like a when will it story.
I sort of did a little thinking about all the various steps we've had in terms of content creation and consumption over the years, and it seemed to me that cable TV, the VCR, the internet, what really drove adoption for all of those things was pornography. That hasn't happened with VR. What do you think is going to be the thing or AR, what is the thing that you think is just going to make this and everyone uses this and doesn't even think about it thing?
Well, actually, it is really driving VR, but I won't get into that. But if you can look things up on what's happening with some of the major adult entertainment companies and their numbers on VR. It's actually staggering. It's just not talked a lot about. On the AR side, I mean, look, one of the big differentiators between VR and AR right now is that VR is kind of following the evolution of entertainment. It's more like the game console, television, movies. AR is more the evolution of the smartphone. It has more productivity capabilities. Again, because it allows to live within this world, it has more communicative, collaborative, social opportunities. That's not to say we don't have the same things in VR. AR just lends better to that. So what will be the killer app of augmented reality? Most likely it'll be the furthering of communication and social. And right now on mobile, it's the democratization of special effects. We've been telling stories on mobile for a while now with Instagram stories, Facebook stories. We take millions of pictures, millions of videos a day, and we've gotten better at editing them, but we haven't been able to add animation. We haven't been able to add special effects like the big guys because it costs too much money, and we don't really have those skills. Everyday Joes don't have those skills. Augmented reality right now is allowing you to make your ordinary moments extraordinary. That will be the killer app, the immediate killer app of mobile augmented reality, and it's happened already with Snapchat and Facebook. If you've ever turned yourself into a dog, you know what I'm talking about.
I've never turned myself into a dog.
You should turn yourself into a dog.
And I should tell all the ladies out there on online dating profiles, if I see a picture of you with a dog, I'm not connecting, just so we know. Thank you, Tom.
Thank you.
It's been great. We could talk like this for hours. And I'm
Thanks,
sure
everybody.
Thank you.